Can we just have an honest chat about something that if you're a real estate agent, realtor or not, you need to stop doing right now? This is Tad Fulford with Rise Up in Real Estate. Today I want to ask your permission to do something a little bit different. I just want to have a chat with you about something that I've been thinking about recently. It's not a fully formed thought, so don't hold everything to the fire about what I'm going to say in the next couple of minutes, but it's something that I have been hearing as we are learning these new rules, and I want to challenge you to think higher, to think deeper, to think longer and harder about what you're saying. So I've heard a few of you out there in the marketplace, and I'm not saying that I wouldn't do the same thing if I were listing and selling property today, but for you that are buyer's agents, I have been hearing something that I want to challenge you to get away from. I think you should stop saying it because I don't think it's delivering the value that you deserve. So some of you are, I know, going into a meeting with the buyer, and this is all new for a lot of you. Some of you have been doing buyer's agency for years like we have in North and South Carolina, but some of you it's brand new. But some of you are sitting down, and I've heard it with my own ears. I've seen it in different opportunities on videos, etc. Some of you are going in and you are leading with the conversation with the buyer by saying something like this: I need you to sign this piece of paper because it's the new rule. It's just the law. It's what I have to do. It's because of the lawsuit. I've even heard those words being said in meetings and in conversations. So all of those things are true, right? I mean, everything about what I just said about when you are leading, talking with a buyer, all of that's exactly accurate. I want to challenge you to take it one step further and ask yourself and then start communicating the why behind this form that you are using. The why, because the why is good for you and the why is good for your customer client. And it's the same thing as the speed limit. Like if you ever asked a police officer or a legislator, why is the speed limit 35 in a neighborhood and it's 65 on a highway? There is a why behind it. They wouldn't say, oh, it's just the rule, just follow it. Don't pay attention to the why, just do what we say. It feels cold. It feels fear-based. It's almost like a ruler, like an authority and a follower kind of relationship. It's almost like a parent and a child. Just do what I say. Just do what the law says. If you are just leaving it at that with your buyers, you're leaving something on the table. If you're just saying to them, I know, we just met. We don't have a relationship now, and I wouldn't expect you to be in a long-term relationship with me, but I have to ask you to sign this form before I show you a house. It's the new rule. Now, there are times where you're going to get to that. You're going to get to a point where you've explained everything that I'm going to talk about in the next couple of minutes, and you still have to come back to that. You'll have a stubborn buyer that just says, I don't understand why, I'm not going to do it, I don't understand why. Then you might have to say, well, you have to. But my argument is, if you go into it with a different approach, that you won't ever get there in most cases. What I would love for you to say when you're sitting down with a buyer, and again, maybe this is not my place to tell you because you're in the cars every day and you're in houses and condos every day doing this on your own, but as I think this through, and I do think lots of things through because that's what we do, I think that the conversation would be better if it were more like this. So recently, things have changed, Mr. Buyer. Have you heard about the changes in the real estate industry? Have you heard anything on the media or in the news? And you let them answer. If you have, what is your understanding of the way things have changed? Let me hear from you for a minute. This is before we show this piece of property, we have to have this conversation. I want to know what you know, and then we can go from there. And no matter what they say, there's an answer, there's a response, there's a direction that you go. But what you've done is now you have asked them where they are coming from because you don't know. You're assuming by saying it's the new rule, you have to sign this. You're assuming, in my opinion, that you feel like they are going to be resistant in having the conversation about compensation, about what you are worth. You're assuming that if you put this backbone on it, that it's the new rule and you have to do it that way, then you can build your value after that. My argument would be find out where they are coming from. They may say, oh, I understand. They may be exactly on your page, on your side. They may completely understand it from your perspective, and then you can go one route, or they may not, and you can go another route. But in my opinion, once you find out what they know, then you can have a reasonable conversation. My guess is they'll say that they heard some things in the media. They'll say things like commissions have been separated or sellers can't pay buyers, or it'll be probably a complete misunderstanding. But then if you understand where they're coming from, and I'm talking about buyers here, then you can have the reasonable conversation. Because in my opinion, what you are doing by explaining to them agency, and again, in North and South Carolina, we've been doing this since about 1993, if I'm not mistaken. When you explain agency, like we've been doing for so long here, you are doing them a favor favor. And this is why the lawsuit was so confusing to me to begin with, because as you sit with a client or customer and you try to explain to them the rules, you're really doing them a favor. That was the whole basis of agency disclosure in the first place, was to protect the public, in my opinion. So the public needed to know what my role was as an agent and as a realtor. What is my role in this transaction? Where do I fit? You obviously fit, Mr. Buyer, because you are buying the property. Obviously fit, Mrs. Seller, because you are selling the property. Where does Tad fit? Where does the agent fit? Agency disclosure was my way of explaining that to them. So the way that I look at this now that we all have to do it, and we have to do it before the first showing, is I want to make sure you understand what role everybody plays in this transaction. I don't want you to be confused. I want us to have this conversation now. Go ahead and get it out of the way so that as we start looking at properties, now we can focus on exactly what you want and need, and we can find that perfect property. That was the whole goal to begin with. You don't want to have this conversation at the end of the transaction, because then they might be confused, right? So I'm sitting down as a favor to the customer. I'm going to explain to you agency and my role. And now in the new world, I'm going to ask you, after we've had this conversation, and there are hundreds of examples of the conversation that you can have to build your value. You should have a conversation guideline that you can put in front of a buyer now and say, hey, this is what I am going to do for you. My desire is to represent you in this transaction and to do these things for you. I've been doing them for this long. I'm with a company that's been doing them for this long. Whatever your value base that you're going to build. Because if you say to them, I'm going to explain to you agency because it's good for you to know who plays what role in our drama here, if you want to call it that. Might not want to call it drama because sometimes it really is. But if you're doing them a favor and then you build your value and then you go to the conversation about what you are owed and who pays it, and what the seller is owed and who pays it, and how there may be some sharing going on if the seller has decided to, all those other conversations can fall into place. But what my whole challenge to you is, don't lead with, this is the law. This is how I have to do it. This is what I've been told I should do. Because it's more like a big parent told me, in a way that, in my opinion, and all of this is my opinion, by the way, you should consult an attorney with all of this nonsense if you haven't already. But when I say to you, I am doing this because it's the new law, in a way, I think it devalues your credibility. It lessens your authority by saying it that way. It almost makes you a pawn in our chess match, not an authority figure, which you are. In that way, you are doing it because you've been told to. And my argument is, do it because it is good for you, Mrs. Customer, Mrs. Client, that you understand the rules and you understand where we go from here. So this is Tad Fulford with Rise Up in Real Estate. Today's message was a little bit different, but I hope it helps you rise up.